Thank you. All right, I'd like to call this work session to order on AO 2020-85, Repealing and Reenacting Title 23 to adopt various codes and local amendments. Let's start with a roll call of Assembly members.
Okay, Miss Allard.
Here.
Mr. Constant. Mr. Dunbar.
Here.
Miss Kennedy.
Here.
Miss LaFrance.
Here.
Mr. Perez-Verdia.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Miss Quinn Davidson.
Here.
Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Mr. Weddleton.
Here.
Ms. Zolotel.
Here.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, as usual, if Assembly members want to get in the queue, please put yourself in the chat, or if you can't access the chat, text me. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Bob, Dole, and Kent Colehouse for the presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. This is Bob Dole, the building official. For this briefing, it will be myself and Brian Dean, the fire marshal. Kent Colehouse is up at the 1110 as we're going forward on that. Just a quick clarification there. And I'm sharing my screen with you of the presentation we're doing. You should be seeing a picture of a public use cabin getting a re-roof. Is that working?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. Good morning. I'm Bob Dole. I'm the building official, and we're here for a process that we do in the municipality every 6 years of updating the building codes that we use for building safety throughout the municipality. I realize this is a 240-something page ordinance you're looking at. This is the long version you see before you here, which is basically a bookshelf of books that are nationally produced through a code adoption process. This is a process we're embarking on now that is the end of a 5-year chain, starting with the national level and going down to the local level. And looking at that code adoption process, probably the takeaway I want to emphasize is you're looking at first a broad array of industry, government, building safety entities, academia, and the government involved, as well as you can see here several recognize the different associations and groups that they represent. Specifically looking at the national process, as soon as the 2015 code went out, they started a process to adopt the 2018 code that we're looking at today. Anyone could participate in that, and many do, from industry and across other interests as well. There's public comment, there's votes at various levels, and it culminates with the basically building officials and fire officials from across the nation voting on the proposed changes. This is a 3-year process at the national level. Like most jurisdictions, we have only renew every 6 years, which I'll touch upon later. So basically 2018, we had a new national level code come out. At that point, we embarked upon adopting it at the local level. The object there is to make sure it fits. The object there is to make sure it fits Anchorage and the needs of Anchorage for to achieve the safety goals there. I referenced Exhibit A is attached to the AM. It shows the list of local participants, over 100 local members of industry, the contractors, builders, engineers were involved in the local deliberations, along with part of my staff as well in that. We had 8 code committees and ample discussion of how it fits for what we're doing here. I cannot give enough kudos to the thousands of hours that industry has donated to do right by our citizens as we're going forward with this process. We took more than a year to complete the process. As first, the code committees met. Each committee was chaired by a member of the building board, and then the building board met to look at what was complete, make sure it was accurate, and then to vote on its adoption before presenting to you all, which we're doing here today in greater detail. Throughout that process, there's probably a big question is why it matters. And basically, there's two reasons. The building codes are there for public health, safety, welfare, to make our buildings safer for their occupants. The reason we update the code is it saves money. First, we want to look at the building code enforcement grading system. This is where we as a jurisdiction are evaluated every 6 years. For our commercial side, we have a 3 rating. That means for commercial properties built since the adoption of the 2012 code, they get a 10% discount on their property damage loss insurance going to filings with the State Division of Insurance because of the quality of the oversight to assure code compliance. For a reason I'll touch upon later, residential properties, homeowners do not get that same benefit of the tax discount. And in effect, there's a hidden tax on homeowner insurance for casualty loss because of adoptions done with the 2012 code. The earthquake, we all saw the different levels of damage, also owner savings. If you avoid those, it avoids some painful out-of-pocket expenses. FEMA has embraced a study that maintains for every dollar we invest in code compliance, it saves $11 downstream when disaster strikes. I'm going to hope that we can turn this over to Brian Dean now, who will touch upon some of the key changes that we see in here enhancing safety and welfare. Brian.
Thank you, Bob. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Assembly. As Bob was alluding to or describing, our code development process allows for changing and advancing technologies in the building industry. And we try to keep pace with that and move forward so that our community can take advantage of new technology that helps us to build more efficiently, safely, and hopefully produce a better product. One of the things that we've been able to take advantage of over the past several decades is lightweight I-joist floor framing. Unfortunately, one of the downsides to I-joists is their susceptibility to damage and failure during a fire. This damage has resulted in floor failure and firefighters falling through a floor assembly and being injured or even killed. A relatively easy fix for this is to protect the underside of the joist with half-inch sheetrock. Our community approved this fix during the 2012 code adoption cycle. And the IRC committee in our current code adoption cycle approved an amendment that would remove this and actually take us backwards. So the administration was not willing to accept this risk and didn't move that amendment forward. Next slide. Required fire protection. Many of you are aware of the difficulties in developing properties further up on the hillside and parts of Eagle River and Chuyak. Most people think of building roads, road access, extending power lines for electricity, maybe water or sewer. One of the things that people don't often consider is firefighting water supply or fire hydrants. Of course, that's quite expensive to do that and really hinders some of our further reaching development areas. This amendment allows another method in lieu of extending those water lines. People have the option right now to build firewise construction. They can provide on-site water supplies for firefighting. But this is just one more thing that we can add in lieu of those things, is to allow the sprinklering or development to continue with the sprinkling of houses that want to go in these further outreach areas. Next slide. The next few slides are going to involve fire protection systems for assisted living facilities. Our community does rely on assisted living facilities in acreage to care for our seniors when we can't care for them in our homes anymore. And currently the state licenses between 300 and 400 of these facilities. And many of them, they run the gamut from no sprinklers to many of them having sprinklers and fire alarm systems. Some of them are monitored and some are not monitored, depending on the size of them. This amendment provides for the monitoring of fire sprinkler systems. Most people are starting to expect that when the fire alarm goes off, that the fire department's going to show up. This really helps with getting the crews there as quickly as possible and assisting with any evacuations that might they might deem necessary or might be required. It also helps the systems keep the system from being tampered with, and not necessarily maliciously, but inadvertently turned off, or valves being shut down, or maybe some maintenance that needs to be handled on the system that the operators just don't know about. This slide before you here is a requirement. Thanks, Bob. A requirement for the systems to be monitored by a third party for places that don't yet have monitoring. We've got a variety of assisted living homes out there that some have gone to the full system monitoring, sprinkler, fire alarm, and some that were put in quite a while ago that have not, that don't subscribe to any sort of monitoring. And I think this just helps us to be consistent across the board, and everyone's expecting that we'll show up and we will actually get those notifications and show up. This is a tiered system here where the most vulnerable places, group I and R occupancies, are expected to sign up for that monitoring much earlier than others, because that's where people live and sleep. So we want to make sure those get handled earlier. Next slide.
And actually, before you continue, I have a question from Ms. Zolotel.
Sure.
Thank you. Can I get a little context, just because this isn't my area of expertise? We have a lot of assisted living homes that are just converted single family homes. So can you just provide, are we talking about that for every type of assisted living home or facility that we have in Anchorage?
We're talking about assisted living homes with 3 to 5 people. Below 3, it's more like a family living environment. Once you get in the more people in there, it's more of, I hate to say institutional, because they're still in kind of a single family setting, but it's more people in more rooms and more requirements for people to be able to evacuate.
So I just want to make sure I heard right. 3 to 5 individuals, this would be required.
That's correct.
Do we know what the cost is on something to come into compliance with this? This seems like really an expensive change.
I'm looking real quick here to see if I can find some costs for you.
And I could take that offline, that's fine. But yeah, it's something I'd like to explore a little bit. Thanks.
Yeah, I think in attachment B to our submittal, we had some cost figures associated with this.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Please continue.
So one of the things that we have in has been brought to our attention through the state licensing, and also for our firefighter responses and emergency responses to assisted living homes, is the requirement to evacuate, and the fire drills that we have witnessed, and in some emergency response, we've seen that the caregivers aren't able to evacuate the residents in a sufficient time to protect them from the event of a fire. And so the proposal here is to have a retroactive installation of fire sprinkler systems in existing facilities. Our new facilities that go in, they're required to do sprinkler systems, and so they have been for a number of years now. And we've got several out there, many out there that don't have a sprinkler system and are not able to meet those evacuation timelines. And what we're finding is Anchorage is kind of the landing spot for most people, for many people throughout the state, and when they need assisted living care. And we're getting more and more of these folks in these places, and they're our most vulnerable population. And we want to ensure that the expected fire safety provisions are in these facilities. And having a fire sprinkler system reduces that emergency evacuation time considerably, so it can be done in a more orderly fashion, and certainly it's safer for the residents. One more thing I wanted to add on that one is there's a right now with our latest tax code revision, there is a provision for a full tax write-off for the installation of fire sprinkler systems. I think that goes till 2020 22, and then it's tiered after that, like 2023 would be 90%, and so on and so forth in following years. Next slide.
So after that, this is what I would call the earthquake-specific add we have to the building code as a result of the 2018 earthquake. Specifically, we are requiring that abandoned units that were previously allowed to be left in place if you upgraded an HVAC system or other mechanical system now needs to be removed. Frankly, having those heavy objects overhead with fittings that are not being maintained doesn't bring out good things when there's an earthquake and gravity brings them crashing through the occupied area. There's we saw a lot of photos of where these failed but fortuitously did not crush anyone beneath them as they fell. Next, I'm going into a series of retained local amendments. These are ones we had with the adoption of the 2012 or earlier that we are keeping in place at the request of the committees. These are a lower standard than the national standards and are mostly done in the name of affordable housing. It is a lower standard. It affects our building code enforcement grading system, but it's just making you aware of these risks as we go forward on these. I'm going to go through relatively quickly unless you have any questions. Reducing exits, not necessarily having a level walking area, which if you're trying to egress a building quickly in the winter when it's icy is a problem. This was the fire sprinkler amendment that Brian touched upon earlier. And this is the risk that we undertake with that. Both of these places had a fire. You can see a little bit of ash around what looks like a waste paper basket and the bed linens on the bed on the right, and the picture on the left. The picture on the right had no fire sprinkler system. Fire sprinklers save lives, they save damage. However, in this has been a local amendment that's carried forward. The water resistive barrier affects building resiliency or durability. It results in a downstream cost to the homeowner by not having it there. Flashing is a local item that simplifies construction. I've heard it typically saves around $800 to $900 on a house by not using the metal flashing. We've talked a lot before about eave blocking in the CEDC. This amendment that I know is near and dear to the hearts of many builders carries forward. I'm sorry, the drip edge is what I was thinking of before when I mentioned the flashing. We also, wind limitations, we don't have the same level of assurance that parts of a roof will not fly off a small structure and become projectiles, posing a risk to property and people. By eliminating the field treatment, we create inroads for capillary action that accelerates rot and deterioration of the material that's supplied there. This is another item that affects long-term durability and resiliency with footing depths. And those are pretty much the ones we retained. We've also made changes to the administrative code. Up till this time, the code has required us to look back approximately forever when there's been a building fine to look at the violation history and to determine the amount of the fine. Similar to like we do with driver's licenses, I maintain it's irrelevant to look back forever, and we should not penalize a company that they've been in business 30 years. We should rather look at their recent history if we have to for fines. This does that. You have another bill pending before you concerning waiving temporary structure cash bonds for COVID-related outdoor tents. This would get rid of those altogether. Frankly, they're a tremendous maintenance cost in terms of administrative time to maintain, and we simply don't need them. We have other enforcement mechanisms if we need to get a temporary structure removed without tying up a business owner's capital while it's out there. I've also asked for an audit function for exempt plan reviews. Right now, the reason homeowners of houses built since that we adopted the 2012 code don't get that insurance discount business owners do is because of exempt plan reviews. I don't want to do away with them, but I believe this creates a middle ground of demonstrating that we monitor for quality assurance, that we can continue to use exempt plan reviews and create a means for homeowners to get the benefit of that discount that business property owners are currently getting. Looking to the future, we have rolled in our first energy code with this code adoption cycle. It is less stringent than the AHFC, which will need to be followed for those seeking AHFC financing. However, it's a step over the long-term quality of the fleet. We're also, similarly to decades ago when we stepped forward and just put in requirements for block heaters for appropriate plugs for them, we've created ones for e-vehicles now, which are the growing vehicle fleet of the future. We do not require that the entire circuit be put in, but rather the conduit be put in for the garage so that it would make it affordable. And what can be done for under $100 at construction will cost you several hundred later on. In conclusion, you're seeing today a very quick 21 minutes so far, culmination of literally years of effort, 3 years at the national level, over a year at the local level. The majority of jurisdictions like us do this every 6 years. I would highly recommend we stick to that cycle and not go to every 3 years as some jurisdictions do. It simply doesn't seem to be worth the churn to go faster than that. We maintain that this version of the building code updates presented to you creates a fair balance between the different concerns of affordability and safety. And it also recognizes the importance of the building code enforcement grading system and associated insurance cost savings going forward. I believe we have 3 building board members with us, Craig Fradine, Jonathan Steele, and Eric Cowling, and I would respectfully ask the chair to recognize them to offer a few comments on this process.
They are so recognized. Mr. Dole, are they with us right now?
They indicated they would be attending.
If those individuals are on a phone number, you need to press *6 to unmute yourself.
This is Eric Cowling. I'm an electrical engineer in Anchorage, and I think all 3 of us was waiting for the other ones to go first, is what it was. I think I saw them all flash across the screen, but I think I was asked to briefly explain our process. We have committees for each areas of disciplines, and I'm for the electrical. We gather together city personnel, inspectors, engineers, electricians, anyone else that was felt like they had something to offer. But we had specific people we invited that were had a tremendous amount of expertise, and we went through the current code, the latest new code, compared that with the last revision and the amendments that had been provided previously, looked to see if they were still relevant or if the language was still needed. And we also entertained any concerns or issues that's been arising since the last amendments, and came up with a list, vetted it through, and put forth the changes we felt were necessary. That's pretty much the process.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Cowling, for your work. Would any of the other 2 like to speak?
This is Mr. Chair and fellow assembly members. This is Craig Fradine. I'm the mechanical engineer on the board. This year I was the chair of the plumbing code. I've been a member of code adoption committees all the way back since the adoption of the 2000 codes, and have been a member or co-chair of the mechanical and fuel gas code and plumbing codes during that time. I would echo what Eric said and Mr. Dole said regarding the committees. I love the code adoption process because of the group of professionals that get together to go through these committees. We have equal representation between the contractors and the designers, also a cross section of everything from large companies to single person owned companies. So we get a great cross section of construction. In addition to that, as was mentioned, we have the person from the municipality who does the permit review drawings, as well as the inspectors in the room. So they get to listen in on how the group is interpreting the code so that they can apply it the way that we collectively have looked at it. And we also hear from them on how they've been interpreting it and seeing things in the field. So it's an outstanding knowledge base of experience, and it's a fantastic thing. And we go page by page through all of those books that were shown and talk about it, see if there's any amendments, any issues we need to do. In addition to that, I also want to mention that Dave Budo with NSTAR was also on the plumbing code as well as the fuel gas code committees. And having NSTAR there, especially with the latest earthquake, was a fantastic thing. The plumbing, mechanical, and fuel gas codes have always been very straightforward, and I attribute that to just the professionalism of the committee that's there. It's no drama. We go through it and vet it very thoroughly. So I think what you have in front of you is a fantastic document that will keep not only the public safe, but also for us, the people who maintain these systems, the facility staff and the maintenance staff and the technicians who work on this stuff safe as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for all of your work. And would the third representative like to speak? All right, not hearing anything else. Mr. Dole, is there any other presentation before I turn it over to questions from Assembly members?
Mr. Chair, we're ready for the questions.
Okay. So if members have any questions, please get in the chat for the queue. I'll start with Mr. Weddleton.
All right, thanks. Do you want me to pause, Mr.
Go
Chair?
ahead.
Sounded like someone else trying to chime in.
This is
yeah,
Mr.
sir.
Steele, and I guess I've been having technical problems with my phone.
Go ahead, Mr. Steele.
I'll make this very brief. I think both Craig and Eric have hit on highlights that are a common thread through all the committees. As the chair of the Fire Code Committee, we met continuously and had great discussions and debates as we reviewed the codes and gave thought to appropriate amendments to the national codes. We started our efforts in 2018, and that continued up through most recently to validating the final amendments before action by the building board. And as was pointed out, these committees are formed of a good cross-section of the industry, both construction and supply, as well as the design communities. And the thoughts and the deliberations have been very thorough, and I think it's a very commendable effort that should be advanced and adopted by the Anchorage Assembly.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Steele, for all of your hard work getting us to this point. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the queue. Mr. Weddleton.
Okay, I got a handful of questions, but I'd just like to make a comment and then do one. And then if you get back to me after you've made the rounds, I'll hit some other things. Would that work, Felix?
Sure, that works.
Okay. One thing on the sprinklers for assisted living homes, there was a note there, full tax write-off, in 1 year. And just for anyone who doesn't know, tax write-off doesn't mean it's free. That's kind of an urban myth. That just means that you, instead of, you don't pay taxes on money you don't make. And what the accountants do in a very odd way is often if you pay to build something, they make you spread that cost out over many years. And what this does is just let you do it all in 1 year. So you don't pay taxes on money you don't make, which seems intuitively obvious. So it doesn't make it free. I mean, that's urban myth. I'm a little concerned. So for Bob or Brian could flesh out some of the requirements for sprinklers, particularly in hillside, and maybe it relates to Chugachygo River as well. Even though they're outside of the building code area, I think they have to apply to these things. But 1,000 gallons per minute supply of water, and if that's for the hillside, a typical house, I mean, you can have, 10 gallons a minute on your well is pretty good. So how would that be accomplished? And then also the phrase is in there. I don't know if you said it, maybe it was in your PowerPoint or in the document here, but it said to allow construction. So does that mean if you don't have that 1,000 gallons a minute somehow that you can't build a house there? And then I think, Brian, you also use the phrase, this adds another option. So that implies it's not really required, but maybe you could do other things. So I guess there's a variety of issues there, but if you could flesh that out for me, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton, through the chair. One of the ideas here is that it is an option. Right now, the requirement is to provide firefighting water supplies for development in those areas without utilities. That means extending hydrants to areas. The problem that we've seen over the last several years is, of course, the cost and difficulty with that. Some other options that people have are to develop to the wildland urban interface standards, Firewise type construction, landscaping features that minimize fire spread, as well as on-site development of water supplies, available water supplies on site, which are not quite as stringent as bringing in utility water supply, but certainly still a significant cost. The sprinkler option wasn't one of those, and of course we haven't seen the previous options being used quite as much. There's some dabbling in that and some proposals going forward. But this is an additional allowance where people wouldn't have to do those things and be able to choose, well, we want to go ahead, we'll do the sprinkler system instead of doing these other types of provisions. As far as the process or cost or ability to bring in that amount of water, I'm going to let Bart Meinhardt, our systems plan reviewer, address that for the water supply. Maybe you could reiterate the question you had about versus 1,000 gallons a minute before he replies to you.
Okay, so my understanding looking at this is that I'm not quite clear. You could do a variety of things, including having available 1,000 gallons per minute. And I guess, how is that accomplished? I mean, a typical well wouldn't be anywhere near that.
So this is Bart, Mr. Middleton, through the chair. So with fire sprinkler systems and the 1,000 gallons per minute, so a couple options out there is, I know Andre Spinell was working on a project up on Hillside. He's exploring putting in a private hydrant system up there with approximately a 40,000 gallon water tank up there to give us, approximately, 30 to 40 minutes worth of firefighting water that the trucks can pump into to supply the area. The other option with the fire sprinkler system is what they've been doing in the assisted living homes. They add on what they call, it's basically it's a home hydrant is the name brand of it. It's a water tank with a pump built into it of approximately 450 gallons to supply the 13D sprinkler system. And then they do a refill rate off of the well to give them approximately about 20 minutes worth of water on the sprinkler system to protect the home. So on average, talking to the industry, it ends up being about, an average house ends up being about $6 a square foot to sprinkler out there. So, depending on the size of the home and stuff, you're probably looking between $20,000 and $40,000 to put a sprinkler system in. One of the things they have found is, as the industry gears up, like in Scottsdale, Arizona, the price per square foot drops dramatically as more people are geared up to deal with the homes out there. I think Scottsdale, Arizona, a few years ago was down to about 85 cents a square foot. Probably now with inflation, they're probably about $2 a square foot to sprinkle a home out there.
And Mr. Weddleton, this is Brian Dean again. I'd like to jump in on that. What we want to remember about fire sprinkler systems is their effectiveness in keeping the fire at its incipient stage or extinguishing at its incipient stage or in the room of origin. So we're not, when we think of house fires that AFD has to respond to on the hillside, it's a pretty good conflagration by the time they get there. It takes a lot of water to put that out. With the sprinkler systems, they're addressing it much earlier in the fire stage. And so like that photo that you saw that Bob presented of that room where the wastebasket and part of the bedding burnt, that's more likely what you're going to see with a home sprinkler system. So you're not having to put out the tons and tons of water.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I understand the value of sprinklers. It's pretty amazing. I've seen them go off, and it's a lot of water in a heartbeat. But that is also a lot of money for a house too. If it were even added $20,000, if you have, that could be. That's a lot, And how many fires do we have up there? In some ways, it's you balance risk with the cost, and which is, that's obvious. I know that's what you do, but it seems high. And I just want to clarify that. So this is an option. What are some of the other things a homeowner could do? You're building a new house, and you say you could do sprinklers, or you could do, what would you build? 30-foot clear, no bushes, and metal roof, or how's that work?
That's exactly right.
Apologies before you answer. So that'll be your last question, Mr. Weddleton, and then I'll put you back at the bottom of the queue.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That you've hit on the nail on the head there about the Firewise type of construction, fire resistive construction for the home itself, and then Firewise treatment for the properties around, fire resistant shingles, and then also water supplies like community water supplies, places where responding crews could draft water as opposed to hauling it in from much further away. Several different techniques that are available to do that.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Zolotel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could someone please explain to me what triggers these requirements for existing, not new construction, but if there are changes made to existing structures? Because in reading through the ordinance, which is really long, I can't quite figure out when things get triggered.
Assemblymember Zolotel, through the chair, I'm not sure which provision that you're referring to. Is this the sprinklers for development on the hillside, or assisted livings, or one of the other provisions that Bob was referring to?
Well, I guess that's the issue I'm having, is I'm uncertain when and if it triggers for existing structures versus new construction. I got that clearly, but the other part of that, and I don't know if someone could make a chart, or because that's really my concern, is these are some fairly substantial changes when it triggers for existing structures.
Right, and Assemblymember Zolotel, through the chair, this is typically for new construction. We do have the provision for assisted living homes for the retroactive requirement for the installation of the sprinklers. And it's just for the assisted living homes, excuse me, not the general construction out there. What we were speaking about, sprinkler systems for the hillside, those are looked at for new development that goes in. And typically it's been a hindrance for new development to go in those areas because of these water supply requirements.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you all for your work on this ordinance. Sounds like a tremendous amount of time, over 3 years. Appreciate also the broad spectrum of participation from industry and professional members and stakeholders. So 2 general questions. The first one, what areas would any of you who've worked on this see as potentially controversial, or have there been any objections along the way to some of these proposed changes? And then the second question, Just noting Mr. Dole's reference in the presentation to the savings, the FEMA study that showed that I think an $11 savings or so for every dollar invested related to building codes. Where are we in the conversation about muni-wide building code requirements? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Through the chair, this is Bob Dole. Answering the second question first, the codes we're looking at adopting today apply throughout the municipality of Anchorage. The difference is inside the building safety service area, the old traditional city of Anchorage limits, the compliance is assessed by the Development Services Department Building Safety Division. That is government, municipal government employees look at the plan reviews except for example, residential, and also actually go out and inspect the work. The same standard is supposed to be maintained throughout the municipality. All are supposed to build to this level. We found, however, that there was a difference of damages and apparent difference of compliance in areas outside the building safety service area after the earthquake. So going back to your first question, we attached 2 documents to the packet when we sent it forward. Exhibit A, which lists the whole group of community contributors. And if you see any of them, I urge you to thank them for their efforts. And then Exhibit B is the list of significant changes that we have identified that we recognize are probably the areas that will draw the greater level of discussion here. And there's a potential bevy of them going along the way. No one appeared at the final building board meetings to voice opposition. And you have 3 committee chairs here who talked about their process. There's extensive give and take within the committees. I'm not aware of anything the committees did not resolve internally, however.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Dole. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton.
Oh, thanks. Looking at the Exhibit B, one thing on this one on truss blocking, it says this 2012 amendment should be reversed. Is that reversed in this?
Through the chair, Mr. Weddleton, it is not reversed. It stays as allowed with the half blocking allowed, even though there is extensive engineering opinions that it results in a weaker linkage between the roof and the structure. It is still a permissible alternative going forward, however.
Okay. Can I squeeze in another, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I didn't quite grasp on the floor joists. So and I'm familiar with the look of the eye thing. So are those what we see buildings used now? Is that allowed now? I mean, what changed on that? I guess I missed the key points on that.
Brian, do you have this one?
Certainly, Assemblymember Weddleton, through the chair. The I-joist construction is something that's been used for quite a long time and allows some greater consistency of dimension, greater spans. It's pretty lightweight, easy to handle. So it's a really amazing tool for construction and used pretty universally. The many years after it went into effect or went into place and being used across the country, that's when it was discovered the areas that weren't protected were particularly susceptible to damage by fire. And when that interior web burns out, which is pretty thin, then the whole floor assembly becomes compromised and can easily collapse with any weight on top of it. You're talking firefighters moving across it, some water load from their hose lines and what they're spraying on there. So the fix was to put about a half-inch layer of drywall underneath it to protect that area from fire from below and give it more time for the fires to be extinguished, for searches and rescues to be effected. And so in the 2012 cycle, we allowed that to go through as a requirement. or the committee's allowed that to go through as a requirement. That's been in place for a number of years now. And this cycle, there was an amendment put forth to remove that requirement and then allow those to be exposed again, which myself and my colleagues don't feel that's a wise decision to go back on.
Wait, so so you're saying this code in front of us now, should we approve it, it would remove that requirement to put drywall there to protect these?
No, and maybe Bob wants to clarify on this. The amendment was put forth and the administration did not put that forth in this code cycle.
Through the chair, this is Bob Dole. Brian is correct. Although the committee proposed an amendment that would remove the requirement to protect these joists, the administration did not put that forward. We would carry forward with the requirement to protect that with drywalling or other means.
Okay, well, that kind of gets to Suzanne's question then. Do you have a list of things that the committee's recommended that you chose not to move forward?
Through the chair, this is it.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and read a comment that was put in our chat by Mr. Nassinger. So please see Exhibit B for a detailed discussion of the topics raised today. It will clarify many of these questions. Are there any other questions or comments from Assembly members?
Can I go back?
Go ahead, Mr. Weddleton.
Okay, so, I appreciate the presentation, and this is an amazing amount of work for citizens to do, and the process is very good. But so we have this on Tuesday with a public hearing, and things may come to light. What is your timeline on this? I mean, you need it immediately, or I mean, you need it for building season permitting by November, or what?
Through the chair, this is Bob Dole again. I think we all recognize it's imperative that builders and designers can know this is coming, when it's coming, plan for it, so they submit designs that are appropriate and also order appropriate material to implement those designs. We would ask for it to be implemented by October 1st so that there's a 90-day notice going into, well, passed by October 1st, going into effect January 1st. There's a 90-day notice. It's coming for work that's already over 50% complete. We can work with them on using the existing codes. But we would ask ideally for a 90-day notice, and frankly, January 1st is probably the logical time in terms of workload and other things to make the transition to use of the new code.
Great, thank you.
Through the chair, may I please expand upon that?
Go ahead.
This is Ross Nassinger, Manager of Engineering Services for the MOA, and I basically supervise plan review, and we're getting a lot of requests from the private sector, from the design community to move on to the 2018 codes. We've recently have had a few projects even submitted under the 2018 codes by individuals who weren't aware that we hadn't moved on already. So there is no like hard timeline, but it is important that we move on. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I think I'm following along a little bit with Mr. Weddleton's comment about the timing on this. And, you know, certainly this group has been working for a long time on all of this, but there are still a lot of people out there that I think want to know what they've landed on, what's actually being proposed. I'm hoping that we take a little bit of time to get the kind of feedback that we have. I know I have some significant concerns out in my area simply because I know I still have a lot of developments that are basically still having places that that they can build on, but they're all attached to wells. You know, we don't have a lot of basically municipal infrastructure where water is concerned. And we have some people that are still hauling water because their wells don't function properly. So anyway, so there are some real concerns in there. And that's something that I want to take some time to try to figure out how we can maybe there are some exceptions or exemptions, but anyway, there are definitely some specific situations where I can see where some of these code upgrades are going to be problematic. So I certainly want to make sure we have the time to call those out and have an opportunity to respond to them. So I'm hoping we don't be in a rush over this one, but thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Gates?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yes, I just wanted to make a short comment. In past years, I worked for the Department of Law. 2 times I was assigned the legal review of the building code updates like this one. And it's a long process. It's a huge document. It's very technical. The legal review, I think, is a small part. And I just wanted to say that today's presentation has been excellent. And so my kudos to Mr. Dole, Mr. Dean, Mr. Steele, Mr. Freedeen. I'm forgetting somebody, but all of you and your team and your committees, hats off. This was a great presentation, very informative.
Thank you. All right, I'll open it up just one more time, see if there's any additional comments or questions. Okay, not hearing anything. Again, thanks everyone for your hard work, and we'll have the public hearing on Tuesday and see what action we decide to take. I'm going to go ahead and adjourn this work session. I'll see the members again at 11:10.